Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, September 16th, 2020, time for another show, and I don't know what to tell you, but we are not going to survive this pandemic. Not while Donald Trump is president, and possibly not while he's alive, even outside of the presidency. I think he just might be too influential to allow us to emerge safely from this thing. I mean, I want to give it a shot, maybe get somebody else to be president. Might be able to do it. Maybe the media would pay attention to what they have to say instead of what Donald Trump has to say via Twitter or via town hall yesterday. We're going to have to talk about this, and maybe nothing else. I mean, it is, after all, likely to be all about the virus and the pandemic in this election. And Greg will come on board just in a few minutes with proof that that is likely the case. And there's no chance in the world that the president now, the guy who's president now, who claims to be president now anyway, is ever going to be prepared to face this thing in any way that has any chance in this world of getting us out of this pandemic. The complaints have been lodged. And yesterday was kind of a good forum for bringing these things to the fore. I didn't know how that was going to go, and I didn't watch, as I usually don't watch these things anyway. But I think I now regret not watching it, though I've seen what looked like the highlights in the clips being circulated of his town hall appearance yesterday. And it did occur to me before it started, I didn't even really actually realize that it was going on, quite honestly. But I saw it being promoted by the ABC Twitter accounts, and I thought, this is an unusual format. I wonder why he agreed to do this. This is really not up his alley and will not serve him well. He's got the ability to bamboozle people occasionally, but if it's just him and there's no audience really, no cheering crowds, George Stephanopoulos moderating didn't really do much for me, but it would be him. It would be easy for him to interrupt. It would be easy for a moderator in this case to think that it's his role to interrupt, to fact check, etc. With just a few people there, I didn't love the idea that they were trying to sell us that this was an audience, a small audience, distanced and masked and everything, that they were real, live, undecided voters. I just, I have a hard time believing that there's people who are genuinely, gosh, I just don't know what to do. But there have to be, because there's millions and billions of people in the world. And so we've learned that from the law of large numbers before. But I figured, this is really probably a real dangerous situation for him. He won't be able to berate and belittle his questioners as members of the hated press, the enemy of the people. These are the people. And although I still did hold out the possibility that he could yell and scream and point and stomp and berate people if they were people of color, and then his rabid supporters would say, well, sure, they had it coming to them. They were uppity people of color. And I thought that was possible, but he didn't go that route. He decided not to go that way. And instead had to kind of sit there and take a shellacking from people. But then he was, the forum was turned over to him. Why are these things happening? Why are you doing what you're doing? And all the questions weren't about the pandemic, but the ones that struck me the most were. And I think at first I thought the line of the night was the flub, where, and that's all it really was, although it's possible that he really doesn't know the difference between herd mentality and herd immunity. But if you're kind to him, and I don't know why you would be, you could say, well, he just, so he flubbed the line. But then, of course, it was obvious from the rest of the line that he had no understanding of what the real term meant either, and at least what it entailed for the death tolls and for the hospitals and for the families who are going to have to endure this thing. he had no understanding of what it would take to get us to herd immunity, even if that's what he meant. I don't know. Maybe he means what he says, and he says what he means, and he meant herd mentality. I don't know. But, well, Bill in Portland, Maine gets at what I think is now has overtaken, in my mind, the top importance in terms of what it demonstrates for us about how empty he is and how, I don't know what, how minuscule are his abilities at a time when we need somebody who's extraordinarily capable. He tweets for us this morning that Daily Kos Radio is live and that you should join me, Kagro X, as I inform you that your waiter will serve you now a plate of his world-famous death vapors. Doesn't matter what the waiter serves you. It's the fact that the waiter is there. This is really, this has now overtaken things in my mind. There was that moment, and I'm sure you've seen the clip now, where the president is asked point blank, and it's such a short answer. It's so revealing and so complex at the same time. The question is asked, why do you not wear a mask more often? And why do you not push for a national mask mandate? And in that, there's an interesting question, like for us procedure weirdos. Why don't you push for a national mask mandate? Well, and of course, George Stephanopoulos has to insert himself into it. And I guess probably some people thought, oh, thank God he's correcting the record. But in our discussion about what happened last night here at home, it was correctly pointed out to me, probably the worst possible kind of intervention, and that Stephanopoulos would have been much better. We all would have been much better served had he intervened to say, why won't you answer this question? I mean, it's a really straightforward one. She has asked you why you're not pushing for a national mask mandate. I have intervened as a technocrat to say, well, it's the governor's responsibility, but she's asking why you aren't pushing governors, perhaps, to do something like this. And of course, a lot of focus on the fact that he tried to refocus the question on Joe Biden's failure to implement a national mask mandate. And we all know why that doesn't work. Joe Biden isn't the president at the moment. And, though it's likely to be the case that he will be later. Oh, I think I may have accidentally hung up on Greg there. But, we'll try this again in just a minute. But besides the fact that he isn't president, the technocratic response of, well, it's really the governor's responsibility. All true, but he doesn't intervene to tell the president that, hey, you haven't answered the basic question. You tried to dodge. Why haven't you implemented a national mask mandate? I gave you the out of saying, well, it's really the governor's responsibility. But then the question of why don't you wear a mask more often? And it was an interesting trick. And you almost think he had been media trained in doing, well, I do wear a mask when I'm in a hospital or in other settings, but blah, blah, blah. That's not a bad start, rhetorically speaking. You disarm the why don't you wear a mask more often by saying, I do. Even though that's not true, I don't wear a mask very often at all. And then right into the Joe Biden thing, which was just weak rhetorically to begin with. But this is all to say that the giant payoff in all of this is he says, a lot of people say immediately the verbal crutch. And I love the fact that Stephanopoulos was keyed into honing in on the verbal crutch. And when you hear it said, you got to break through it, right? A lot of people say masks are bad. A lot of people say it. A lot of people say it. If you look at those things, a lot of people say it when you look at it. Masks are bad. Who are these people? I was waiting for Jerry Seinfeld to break through like the Kool-Aid guy. Who are these people? Oh yeah, I'd love to know. But then Trump indignantly, and this was the most fabulous part of the whole thing to me, because he's furious almost, but he's certainly indignant. I'll tell you who these people are. How dare you ask a question like that? You doubt me? I'll tell you who these people are. And then there's this brief pause. It really should be longer as he mulls over what the suicide that he's about to commit here. And the answer is waiters. Yeah, honestly, thank you, Greg. I appreciate the sound effects on that. Waiters. This guy just staked the survival of this country and the world on waiters. Epidemiologists? No. Public health experts? No. Doctors? No. Nurses? No. Kindly old ladies who've done their reading? No. Waiters, who, by the way, say, I don't think masks are a problem. He then goes on not to cite any sort of conversation with the waiter, not to give the name of a waiter, not even to tell you where he saw such a waiter. And that's a whole separate question. Where is Trump running into waiters? Fumbling, fidgeting waiters who can't wait to get their masks off. Nowhere. The only places he eats outside of the White House is at his own restaurants on his own properties. And if he's got a problem with the way they're masked, then I don't know. I don't know what he should do about it. Who cares? The point is, he's not getting any information from waiters. And no waiter that he's encountered has ever said to him, sir, I have to tell you, tears streaming down his eyes. Masks are bad. Not I can't handle the mask. Not I'm touching too many things. Not masks are inconvenient. Masks are bad. I've reached this scientific conclusion as a waiter. And some waiters can do this, I'm sure. But not these. And nobody told him anything about masks are bad. But the whole ability of this country and maybe the world to survive this pandemic hinges on having a leader of the free world who's talking to real experts with real science or even real people who have real thoughts. And it's so evident that that's not the case. Here he is on the national stage racking his brain. What is the answer? What's the answer I can give to convince people that masks are bad? Remember, people are storming their governor's mansions, storming their state legislatures, armed with assault rifles, ready to kill, rising up against tyranny on the president's word that some people do say masks are bad. And they all now find, not that they would care because they don't care about reasons for anything, but if there's any of them with any conscience whatsoever, they now find out that they've held their state elected officials at gunpoint, demanding that we kill ourselves in a pandemic. Because why? Please, Mr. President, finally give me the answer. Who says that? I mean, I've trusted you to this point. Who am I doing this for? Waiters. I saw a waiter and he touched a mask and he touched a plate. That can't be good. This whole thing. There's a revolution afoot in this country because the president says a waiter told him masks were bad, and no waiter did tell him masks were bad, and even if they did, they were wrong about the masks. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, and I can't believe we're not burning Trump out of the White House this very moment. We're all going to die, everybody, and it's because, I don't know, you got to think of something. Michelin Man. Yeah, waiters. That's the answer. Here we are. And today the national press is going to file into the White House and they will let us know what the supposed president of the United States thinks is the clear way out of a global pandemic that threatens to kill us all. And his answer to this is waiters. And they're going to say, some waiters. And well, we're going to have to normalize waiters now as epidemiologists. So there we are. I don't know what else matters. But Greg is here to assure us that there are other things. But I'm pretty sure he disagrees with the whole waiter thing.
Well, I keep thinking of this, like the Waiters, the classic 1980s comedy with Winona Ryder and Kristen Slater.
Right. I mean,
everybody knows that. It's a cult classic, Right. And so if we're not sure, why don't we go to a West Virginia diner and ask the waiters what they think?
That must be it. I mean, we have normalized the idea that all the repository of all wisdom is in the diners. And so why not? By the way, if your waiter is an epidemiologist, please tip him more.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't really make as much as they should, so they got to take these side jobs. So listen, let's just put things in perspective here, all right? I'm going to do that in two ways, and because our listeners have asked us to at least touch upon the Senate races and, of course, polling, we'll do that too.
I thought it was all waiters. All
but
yeah,
this was a week ago or so from Charlie Cook, not a week ago, 4 days ago, but it feels like a lifetime, right, in politics. Trump's ceiling is too low for him to be reelected. That's the title of the article. And it goes on and tells us about what we know. And, obviously anything can happen. But he concludes with this, and I think it's always good to keep this in mind. Yeah. Keep it in mind when you hear that maybe the Big Ten will play football, maybe they won't. Maybe that's the October surprise. We'll see. LSU football team all has coronavirus, and who cares is basically what the football coaches are saying. And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I understand the caution that many in my business have, says Charlie, after the surprising outcome in 2016. But the only way this year resembles 2020 is that they both are presidential years. Trump is the Republican nominee, and both years begin with a 2. That's it.
Okay.
Alan Greenspan's irrational exuberance has given way in my mind to irrational caution. This is not 2016. And of course, I love Charlie Cook. And so in modern media style,
Yes.
CNN's Brian Stelter goes out and finds some of these undecided voters that were at that town hall last night
Oh.
and asks them, okay, he talked to you, you asked your question,
Yeah.
he gave you his answer. What do you think?
That's a good
So he
question.
was able to reach 3 of them.
All right.
And the title of the piece, oddly enough, is Venturing Outside the Fox Bubble, Trump Faced Voter Questions and Didn't Sufficiently Answer. And for the whole town hall, I mean, just to give you an idea of how the whole thing went,
Yeah.
I think I'll give you Kevin Cruz's summary in a tweet last night. Whoever in the White House agreed to have Trump do this town hall session live on ABC should probably start packing up their office.
Yeah. I have an answer. Or I've
Yeah?
seen an answer. Jason Miller is apparently the answer. And the answer comes from A.J. Delgado, who knows him better than I do.
Yeah, knows him in the biblical sense.
New, anyhow. Yeah. Right.
So voters stood up and spoke the truth to President Trump on Tuesday night, and Trump had a very hard time coming out of his Fox bubble to face real questions. That's what made the ABC town hall so important to see. How did it go? Did the questioners feel they were heard? Did they feel like the president addressed their concerns?
Waiters. Oh, sorry.
All right. 3 people responded right away, beginning with Carl Day, the Philadelphia pastor who asked Trump this question: when has America been great for African Americans in the ghetto of America? Mm-hmm. So Trump talked about the pre-COVID economy and cited tremendous African American support. They pressed him. When was America great? He didn't answer. I don't feel like he adequately answered it, they told me, but essentially in doing so, he actually did. America was never great for black Americans in the ghetto.
Yeah,
So
there were a lot of backhanded answers.
That's
Yes,
one.
That's true. Yeah, good one.
Next one. The very first question, Paul Tubiana of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania,
Bethlehem. All right.
was the very first questioner. He said, Mr. President, I voted for you in 2016. I'm a conservative, pro-life, and diabetic. I've had to dodge people who don't care about social distancing and wearing masks. I thought you were doing a good job with the pandemic until about May 1st. Then you took your foot off the gas pedal. Why'd you throw vulnerable people like me under the bus? Let me just say parenthetically, these guys are asking fantastic questions, way better than the professionals are asking.
Yeah, I have to agree.
I held my breath, says Brian Stelter. Trump has never been challenged about his mishandling of the pandemic quite like this. His initial response, well, we really didn't.
There you go. Good.
And then he blamed China. And then he said within we're weeks of getting a vaccine. We'll talk about that
Which
in a
we're
bit.
not.
So how did that go? He didn't answer anything. He was lying through his teeth, said Tubiana.
Dentures.
And Tubiana is like so many people. As the pandemic raged, I was feeling scared, alone, and powerless, he said. There were failures of government on both sides of the aisle last winter and spring, but he felt like Trump stopped providing leadership as the crisis continued from spring to summer.
That is true.
And he said he thought Trump stuck to the canned response at the town hall.
No doubt.
Then the last one, the best one,
Correct. Sir.
was Alicia Black, an English professor at Kutztown University, brought up healthcare. Black was born with sarcoidosis and said she'll die without the medication covered by her expensive insurance plan. She asked, what's he doing to protect people like her? And he dodged. Actually, this is the lady, when she started to answer the question, Trump interrupted her, and she gave him the side eye and said, sir, I haven't finished asking my question yet.
Yeah. It wasn't even side.
Sit
Straight
down,
on.
sit down, and be quiet, she basically said with a glare, until I'm done. And the mask didn't hide that.
That was one of the great things I thought about the format was that I thought might happen is if somebody says something like that, you can't berate them and tell them to shut up in a town hall. So it happened.
Right. So she says, he didn't answer my question. She said she left the event fuming, but resolved to do something about it. Going into the town hall, she said she was on the fence about voting at all in 2020. A very important point. When these people said they were undecided, they didn't mean I can't decide which of these guys to vote for. What they meant was I can't decide whether I'm going to vote.
Wow. Well, Similar, but yeah.
No, not similar. Very different.
I mean, you would think. I mean, honestly, if the choices are these two, I can't believe that you choose not to.
I know I hate Trump. I'm not so keen on Biden. I'm not sure I'm going to vote. Is very different than I'm thinking about the issues between A and B, and I just can't decide when I get in the voting booth who I'm going to pull that lever for that doesn't exist anymore.
That part is true. To me, it's like I can't decide whether I'm going to vote or not. But then when you get to the part about if you think about the issues, all right, you've just decided. Well, you just said you were going to think about the issues.
Going into the town hall, she was on the fence about voting at all in 2020. That's why she qualified as an uncommitted voter by ABC's standard. But now she says, I'm voting for Biden.
Yeah.
Trump reanimated me to vote.
Good. So there you go.
That's 3 out of 3 people who specifically were there, and there weren't that many people that were asking the questions. Yeah, so that's a significant chunk of the people who were supposedly uncommitted, undecided. And they all said, he's either lying or he motivated me to vote against him. And I'm watching this thing, and even before we had this morning with Brian Stelter's write-up last night, I said, how in the world does Trump think this is good for him with undecided, uncommitted voters? Yeah. And here's your answer. It's not.
Yeah, it can't be. I mean, he might have thought it would be, but he was wrong.
Well, he thought walking over to that church and holding the Bible up was going to be good.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of stupid people in his campaign, but this was just like really, really bad.
Why didn't he do that? That's so obvious. Now, in hindsight, he should have tear gassed the audience.
Right. So here's a little quick roundup of what some of the pundits were saying that Brian Stelter did in the same piece. Okay. Washington Post fact check. Trump says he couldn't have slowed coronavirus. Experts have said he could.
Well done.
Daniel Dale's recap of a cringeworthy moment. A crying voter tells Trump, and this was really tough to watch. A crying voter tells Trump at length about how her mom, a fellow immigrant, died of cancer, and asks a question on her mom's behalf about immigration, and Trump repeatedly talks about how her mom died of COVID.
Okay. Well, it starts with C.
Yeah. So you want to portray empathy, and I'm listening. I'm a good listener.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, the empathy thing was out the window.
Well, that was just like, fingers chalk on a blackboard. Just, The New York Times' Maggie Haberman, Trump, by only doing rallies and almost never doing town halls, has been insulated from the kind of voter interactions that usually help incumbents as they're running. But he craves adulation, and many of his aides enable it, so this town hall is bracing for him.
Yes, and waiters.
Bracing in a way that, I don't know what, it's Inigo Montoya, right? Bracing. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
You've only used it once, and you got it wrong.
Right. The LA Times' Chris Majurian, it's striking how little new the president has to say. He's mostly recycling the same things he's been saying for months or years. Well, if you ever watch one of his rallies, that's exactly what he does.
Yeah.
Susan Glasser, Trump's like an American tourist abroad. He says the same thing over and over again, just getting louder each time, entirely unable to speak the language of his interlocutor, yes. Or even trying. Fox framing on the Ingram angle right after the town hall was great. ABC springs ambush on President Trump at town hall. I have that tweet over at Daily Kos this morning at the bottom, but it includes a video of the people asking the questions. So you can hear in their own words and their own tone what it is they're asking. Right. And it's like, okay, these are normal people asking reasonable questions. He was ambushed.
Super soldiers. Right. Yeah, I saw that.
Right.
Which, I mean.
And Stelter's interpretation is that stay on Fox. Don't stray to other channels.
And, of course, I think you interpreted it this way last night, too, is that that's Fox telling you he lost. He lost the town hall debate against himself.
Right. So Oliver Darcy thought Stephanopoulos was steamrolled. Olivia Nuzzi tweeted, I understand you have to pick your battles when you interview the president, but so far there's been very little follow-up to Trump's most dishonest and confusing statements. That's where Daniel Dale comes in.
Yeah.
And that's basically how the public, in the form of people who were participating in the debate, and the pundits reacted to that town hall. I had the same reaction. I mean, Stephanopoulos was okay, but the stars were the ordinary people asking the questions.
Yeah, they did very well.
Trump failed.
Yeah, that too. Stephanopoulos, didn't offer much in the way of help or resistance, and when he did insert himself, it was my observation, the one that caught my attention was this technocratic answer to, whereas as the moderator, and this was where his background in government came through. Well, I can actually say this is the responsibility of the governors, not of the president. But your real role here was to say, hey, how about that question, though?
Well, in the 2 minutes before the break, I'm going to give you some polling from Nick Gorovich and Navigator. It's issues polling, not horse race polling. We'll do that after the break. Latest Navigator survey out this AM, 3/5 of voters think Trump has given up fighting coronavirus, and just 39% say he's fighting hard to stop the spread. Relevant for the discussion we're just having, relevant to the questions that the people at this town hall asked. Mm-hmm. The public thinks Trump has given up on coronavirus, even as half still say the worst is yet to come. Trump's job approval overall, -12, and on the pandemic, -17 are underwater. They had low points in July, so he's recovered a little bit since then, but they're still pretty bad. And we took a look at what's bothering people about the president's behavior in recent weeks, says this poll, and the questions you heard last night. The top two answers are his downplaying of coronavirus and how he's making the situation in cities across the country worse. Within the coronavirus issue specifically, the top concerns about Trump's recent handling of the issue is the admission of downplaying coronavirus on Woodward tapes. That's getting through to the public, and his push to rush to get a vaccine approved before the election, even if unsafe, is the number 2 concern.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting, sobering data and vaccines. A big gap between the number of people who say they're pro-vaccine, 71%, and the number who say they'll get a vaccine for coronavirus is at 50%. And the reason people aren't sure is they generally support vaccines but feel unsure about whether the coronavirus vaccine will be safe.
Yeah.
And when you ask people what's the bigger concern, it's going too quickly. Overwhelming. Yes. He's going too fast.
Well, I think it's widespread, that belief.
Right. And who's least trusted? Donald Trump. So you saw all of that in the town hall questions last night.
You did. And I'm glad that one was reflected, too. I'd like to return to that question briefly of the vaccines, because I think there's a serious danger of the national media flubbing that even worse than was previously imagined possible. And I'll bring that up. You might even know what I'm talking about. You may guess. We have 2 minutes to scramble for an answer. If you don't, I'm talking to you in the audience. It's a quiz. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support.
Give you time to look for it.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio, where we're scrambling desperately for the right citations to go where we wanted to go. But we'll get there. And now our plan is Greg will say something, and I'll go look for it.
Yep.
There you go.
So we were talking about the Senate a little bit on Monday, and some of the listeners, tweeted and wrote it and said, why don't we talk a little bit more about where the Senate stands? Where does the Senate stand? Well, where you stand depends upon where you sit normally. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, we have some relatively close races. And I think and maybe some trouble spots for Democrats and maybe some trouble spots for Republicans, I think we should at least mention.
All right.
Okay.
For that.
ESPN alert, Big Ten is expected to announce today it's returning to football in October. So there's your October surprise. But when people don't trust, it doesn't necessarily redound to the benefit of politicians. And what just happened in LSU, where half their team or more, or most of the team, according to the coach, is positive for coronavirus. And when you're talking about athletes whose careers may be ruined, who may have a small percent, 10, 15% of the young men in college situations on football teams have been described as having potential cardiac effects from this, which can last longer than just the virus itself, part of the problem with coronavirus. It's not so easy to just say, okay, well, the bars are reopening. That's the end of that. Well, we'll just have Big Ten football. That's the end of that. I'm sure a lot of political pressure has been put on that, and the Big Ten includes some important political states. But that story is going to be a whole lot more complicated than it looks. So don't take it on face value when you hear it. That's my political professional advice for you. And I am not a pro.
Oh, well, all right.
But keep that in mind. So let's do some Senate races here. Hot off the press is just out. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat, 52. Martha McSally, 42. It's a 10-point lead. Ohio Predictive Insights. They're the ones that just had Biden up by 10, I think, over Trump in Arizona, a very important state. And Arizona in general, not just that one. YouGov has Kelly up by 7. Gravis has Kelly up by 5. Bennonson Strategy Group has Kelly up by 3. That was a relatively conservative set of polls for the Democrats that came out on the 10th. Change Research, Kelly up by 6. Redfield and Wilton, Kelly up by 15. It looks like Martha McSally's going to lose. It looks like Arizona is not solidly Democratic this year, but certainly turning a light shade of blue to the point where you can't say it's done and you can't put it away. But all of the information coming out of Arizona suggests Trump's going to have a lot of trouble holding on to that win. And Martha McSally looks like she's in big trouble in terms of her race. Okay, next, let's take a look at Colorado. Not much to see there. Global Strategy Group has Hickenlooper up by 10. Fabrizio Hart has Hickenlooper up by 5. Morning Consult, Hickenlooper up by 9. Public Policy Polling, PPP, Hickenlooper up by 9. Morning Consult, Hickenlooper up by 6. So Cory Gardner seems to be in big trouble there, like nobody believes him. He's one of these guys that votes to get rid of the Affordable Care Act and then runs ahead saying, I really want to defend pre-existing conditions. And the public isn't stupid, just like they weren't stupid on that town hall last night. And so he's not getting any credit for that.
Well, all righty then.
Up in Maine, Sarah Gideon and Susan Collins has already had one debate. And famously, Susan Collins would not commit as to who she would vote for president. That's probably going to hurt her. I'm just reviewing polls. There hasn't been anything like super recent. But September 11th, Citizen Data has Gideon up by 8. Fabrizio, Ward, and Hart Research on the 10th has Gideon up by 1. Again, that was a fairly conservative set of polls for the Democrats. Public Policy had Gideon up by 5 in August. And Gideon up by 7 and by 8 in a couple of other polls. The point is that Gideon's led in just about every poll over the last 2 or 3 months. So Susan Collins isn't, counted out, but she's in deep trouble in Maine. So that's how that's going.
I'm for that.
And then there's North Carolina. It's a very close race. Cal Cunningham is leading, however, in the last 8 or 9 polls, usually between 1 and 3 points. There's some older polls in September 9th that have him up by a little bit more. Survey USA on September 14th had him up by 7. But for the most part, it's a relatively close race, but Cunningham seems to be in the lead. Remember, this is North Carolina, a very close state. And I was talking with Josh Putnam, one of the political scientists who's following the race and has his own, is a voting expert, has his own blog about where the race is going. And I said to him, because I've been talking with him throughout this entire period, that earlier in the summer, it was really hard to guess and tell which of the 2 states, Arizona and North Carolina, was more likely to break for Biden. Because North Carolina has a history, at least, of occasionally voting for Democrats, and Arizona, basically doesn't.
Yes.
But Arizona was looking better than North Carolina. And I described North Carolina to him as, looks like Arizona's taken the lead in being a state Biden can pick up over North Carolina, which is still like a 1 point, 2 point lead for Biden at most. And I described North Carolina as very stubborn. And he said, that's an interesting way to describe it. And he went back and he looked at the Obama-Romney race. And in that race, he said the entire election period North Carolina didn't move by more than a point.
In the whole time.
And the whole time. It was really interesting in that respect. And it was slightly Romney. And this time, he said he's looking at his data, and it's the same thing, and except that it's slightly Biden. He's still got a 1.5 point race, and he said it's just like 2012 in that sense, because it is stubborn. North Carolina often is stubborn and just doesn't seem to move. Right?
Okay.
So it's just one of those things that you just file away and say, okay, that's one of those situations where sometimes you look at a 6-point lead like we got in Wisconsin this morning from ABC Washington Post polling and say it's 6 points, but it doesn't feel like a solid 6 points that you can like go to the bank with.
No.
Whereas sometimes a 1 point lead, when it just doesn't change, is like, that's insurmountable.
I guess after a while.
It's just that's how it feels. I mean, not necessarily true because clearly, margin of error and all sort of that you don't really know.
Yeah, all right. On the day of, certainly the poll that matters, as they say when they're losing.
Right, and as it turned out, the final results in North Carolina, by the way, for people who don't remember, is that Romney won by 2 points. So that stubbornness in terms of consistent polling, not changing, slight lead for Romney is exactly how it turned out, and hopefully that'll be the same this year with the slight lead for Biden that we see. But in any case, that's going to affect the Senate race as well. And so hopefully Kyle Cunningham's lead will hold up.
I hope so. Interesting development out of that race yesterday. And I was scrambling around to try to remember whose debate response it was that engendered this. But I was, of course, infuriated by press coverage of events yesterday. And I guess still astonished and surprised to see people who I think of as relatively capable reporters making this mistake. But I guess did they have a debate? Is that what was going on?
Yes, they were having a debate.
Very recent. And this one grabbed me. I saw.
And Cunningham, by the way, did very well in the debate. Yeah? Played populist and did quite well. And
you wouldn't know it from what I was able to find the national media discussing about the debate, which was not I didn't go in search of it, but what I found was, and I saw people reacting to, for instance, the tweet from Sung-Min Kim, the White House correspondent for the Washington Post, otherwise, normally considered a relatively capable person, astonished at the expressed reluctance from Cunningham to jump right in and accept a vaccine pre-election from Trump. As you were saying, the majority of Americans very wary of what it might mean for Trump to say he's rolling out a vaccine just in time for the election, and don't worry, it's totally safe, even though we haven't used any of the testing protocols. And Cunningham, I guess, here's the tweet. She says, wow, Cunningham indicates he won't take a coronavirus vaccine if one is made available. I've got questions. That's the quote. Because he's seen, quote, politics intervening in what should be driven by health and science. Yes, I would be hesitant. This engenders a wow from Kim here. And other journalists took it even further, although more partisan journalists certainly. I noticed Philip Klein, I think the Washington Examiner guy, I think it's Examiner, maybe Times, I don't know, I'll look him up. But yeah, he too. But basically the thing was the journalists started saying, oh, I can't believe Democrats think the winning message here is to go full anti-vaxxer. Right. And as though that were even equivalent.
But to put in perspective, Sun-Min Kim is very, very even-handed, without question. I know her. She was actually my editor at Politico when back in the day we were doing point-counterpoint stuff.
Okay.
In what they used to call the arena. And she's very good, and she's very even-handed, and her quote, just as you said, was exactly that, but didn't put spin on it like, oh, this is good, this is bad. It's just, I didn't expect him to say that, wow.
Yeah.
Not, wow, this is terrible.
Right.
It's, wow, he actually went there.
Yeah,
He
I guess
actually
so.
said, I don't know if you can trust Donald Trump.
Well, that's true, but I think that's not a wow moment for a Senate candidate, Democratic Senate candidate. Wow, he said he doesn't trust
Ordinary
Trump.
Americans were sitting in the middle of this pandemic and we're waiting on a vaccine. And now you have somebody who's running for office who says, I don't know if I can trust the president on this. That's like a moment. Now, it's not like the huge moment. It's not like the rest of us don't know that.
52%
if you're not
of us
paying
have that
attention,
moment.
though, there it is on TV, and he said that.
I guess so.
And you know it's going to come up at the first debate. And so naturally that engendered a whole bunch of stuff. The next thing that happened is that Republican operatives are saying, oh, my gosh, we're going to make a campaign commercial out of this.
Yeah.
And, okay, fine. Go ahead. Make a campaign. Resign your damn commission, hot lips. See if I care. The whole point is that the American public, since we're doing movies today for 40 and 400, Alex, the whole point.
That's the old quote.
Right?
40. All right.
Yeah.
Yes. Go on.
Back
Sorry.
What's my line?
Inflation.
So you go back and look and say, but the American public is totally on Cal Cunningham's side with this. And I just cited you polling from Navigator that shows that. And that kind of reaction from the press just is so reminiscent of all the crap we saw in, the W era. Oh, my gosh, Bush just said something. The popular George W. Bush just said he's not popular. He just said something this and everybody. Yeah, but we know the public isn't there. And this just happened a couple of weeks ago, just to give you an idea of how reporters' memory is just so clouded these days, with the giant 1 month, January, February, September Corona month. Just last month, there were issues in Kenosha, and the press came to the conclusion this would automatically help Donald Trump. And the polling came out, and it was exactly the opposite. It's actually helping Biden because Biden is seen as a far more stable, influencing force. And that's what people want. They want stability, which is interesting because Biden is starting to turn this around and saying, look, you're worried about the suburbs? How about we make it so that they don't burn down?
That might be nice.
By fires.
Yeah. Not
by climate
Antifa.
change.
Yeah.
That's your risk. That's real. This Antifa stuff is fake, but the climate stuff is real, and the Antifa stuff isn't affecting you. You're just he's trying to make you afraid that it will be. This fire stuff is affecting you.
Yeah.
And so let's deal with that. So, the press's reaction to all of this is often backwards because they're just so conditioned to going back and getting quotes from Republican operatives. What do you think about this? So I know what to write about. And the Republican operatives say, oh, we're going to make a big play of this. Oh, well, then it must be important. And then they go back and they write their article. But no, that's not what's going on here at all. Cal Cunningham is saying what Americans are saying. And it's pretty straightforward. I'm pro-vaccine, but unless Trump listens to the scientists, which is, by the way, Joe Biden's position.
Yeah, not waiters, scientists.
If we listen to the scientists and they say it's okay, I'm fine with it. But we got to do that and not rush it. And so that's what America's position is. And so for the reporters to rush out and say, oh, obviously it's a gaffe. Yeah. Aren't you over this gaffe thing yet? That is like so 2008.
True. Yeah, and I guess the worst of them, of course, were the more, like I said, the more partisan folks like Philip Klein, who was the first one to trot out the idea.
Probably pretty sensible, but he was pretty off base on this one.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know what I would call him, but certainly it didn't help him.
Conservative points of view, but you can say, look, Philip, this is this and that is that. And he'll say, yeah, that's true, but, on the other hand.
Time. Yeah, his reaction to this one was...
He's not Hugh Hewitt. He's not, he's not Jason Miller.
Okay, well, if you say so. Well, it's always possible. I don't know. I don't pay enough attention to him to.
It's not Danielle Fletcher. We'll get there.
This one rose to my attention level, and it was like, "Hey, that's bad." He was answering. Basically, his setup was: if Biden wins, a vaccine comes out, and there is some right-wing conspiracy mongering, it will be interesting to see all these liberals, like Brian Beutler, who had called this whole thing out when Sun Kim said it. It'll be interesting to see liberals like Beutler memory hole their irresponsible anti-vax flirtation, which of course it wasn't. But this sets up as all things, if they are said to be vaccines, even by congenital liars, must be injected into your body. And if you refuse to do it, you are a full-blown anti-vaxxer and you have no basis on which to criticize anything.
Right, but that's
right,
what I meant about Philip Klein. He's basically coming from the point that science is good and vaccines are reasonable. Start there.
Okay.
Then he makes this incredibly bad point about and puts his partisan hat on and say, okay, all you liberals are going to screw it up.
I guess
okay,
so.
Fine. You can argue with him about that. But where he's coming from is that you really have to follow the science, and vaccines are good.
Sure.
Okay, fine.
Just that the vaccines are good because they follow science. Vaccines that don't follow science are not good.
Aren't so
that's
good.
Mountain Dew,
so,
sir, not
he's
a vaccine.
Missing the point that's the argument, just like the reporters, not Sunmin Kim, but the other reporters talking about what Cal Cunningham said, missed the point that what he's trying to say is that if Trump pushes this too fast, and then when somebody asked him about it, and this is the part that gets so frustrating with reporters, so somebody asked them to clarify, and he did, and he said exactly that. What I'm saying is, if we follow the science, we're good, and if you rush it without the science, it's bad. Yeah. And then they write it up as, oh, now he's trying to do damage control. I'm not doing damage control. I'm explaining how your interpretation of what I said was wrong from the get-go.
Okay.
And that mine is totally consistent.
You're back on
well, it's damage control then. Because if you're explaining to me that I got it wrong, that must be the definition of damage control.
Sure. Okay, well,
and that's why sometimes you listen to the reporters and say, why don't you get some science people here instead of the stupid political reporters? Why don't you get some science reporters here to cover these things?
Why not? I don't know. What would be the point of talking to science people when there are
Well, they're going to ask better questions than you're asking. I mean, the public is asking better questions than you're asking.
Talk to them. Some of them are waiters. This is an argument for talking to waiters.
So that's North Carolina.
All right.
Then, so what you're looking at is that probable pickups for the and not done deals, but very competitive and certainly very hopeful pickups in Maine, in North Carolina, in Arizona, and in Colorado. Okay. So that's 4 pickups for the Democrats, but then they've got another one to win if you want to get to 51. Plus, you have to cover the fact that you might lose a few.
Okay.
Right. So the ones that are out there that we're still watching are places like Montana. We don't have enough polling, but Daines has basically been leading Bullock, the Democrat, by a point or two. So close enough, too close to call. Not really clear what's going on there. Not enough polling out of Iowa. Everybody's looking at Minnesota and Wisconsin. They keep polling Minnesota and Wisconsin, but nobody's doing Iowa, or because there aren't Senate races of interest. Ohio. Georgia, and in the Georgia races, the Republicans appear to be a couple of points ahead, although there is at least one poll that shows Ossoff competitive, but in the other one, Loeffler seems to be winning that race. Iowa, not enough polling, but Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield are trading positions. That one seems to be very close. And so we really don't know what's going on in Iowa. So Montana and Iowa are other pickups that the Democrats may have and would need if they really want to make up for the fact that Alabama doesn't look particularly good for Doug Jones. And frankly, if there's a dark horse, you didn't know about it, under the radar for Democrats that you have to worry about, it's Michigan.
No.
That's Gary Peters and John James. And James is just a better campaigner. So in a close race, sometimes, who the candidate is matter.
That would be interesting. I wouldn't mind that.
So that's on my radar I'm not sure about that one. I better keep an eye because Peters is ahead by 3 or 4 points. Yeah. And the question is, Biden, who's probably ahead by 8 or 9, does he have coattails?
Good question.
I don't know.
Well tailored, I'm sure, if he does have them.
I don't know. He's a regular kind of guy, so I don't know if it's well tailored.
He's got a good tailor. I know that.
But does he have a good waiter? So that's that's where things stand with the Senate. So it's really unclear what's going on. The Democrats have a reasonable chance to pick up the Senate, but it's by far not a done deal. And I would expect that if Trump's national polling stays where it is, and Charlie Cook's right about his floor is not high enough to really get him over the edge there, that the Republicans are going to stop paying attention to Trump and start concentrating on these Senate races.
Yeah, I guess that we ought to do that. Montana makes me think of the old idea that wouldn't it be interesting to take one of these low population states and just flood it with money and advertising and see if you can just muscle your way through to winning Senate seats where these contests are, they're in the hands of an extraordinarily small number of people.
Right.
It would be interesting to, and I mean, especially if you have a candidate who's won statewide there before, how can we be, on shaky ground there? That's just so sad.
Now, nationally,
yes,
on September 1st, according to 538's aggregate, nationally, Joe Biden was leading by 7.0 points.
7.0. Okay, that's
and 15 days later, where do you think he is?
7.1.
7.0.
Oh. I tried to give him a little boost there.
Joint SIFE, which had been in the 14s, is now 7 for Biden. YouGov is now 9 for Biden. There was a Morning Consult poll, I think, out 8 for Biden, and it's been 8 for the past couple of days. That's more of a tracker. And so remarkably steady
I can't get him to 7.1.
Polling here. If you look at the graph of where the polling is on 538, if you were a train, you would not come off those tracks. They are just so straight.
Not supposed to. Right. I believe it's got to be at least 7.09 then.
7.00736, right? 3.14159. So you have all of that going on, and the race is steady as she goes, and that's why I get back to where we started with Charlie Cook. It's like, this is just, look, we know where this is going. Biden is winning this race. And what's really interesting is that we're now, September 29th is the first debate, and it's the 15th, so we got 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's the 16th
2 weeks,
now.
Okay? Yeah. And the polling right before the debate, and we're in that period now, becomes really accurate.
Yeah. Are you sure he'll have a debate? I mean, if you get the president to come out and say that there'll debate in 2 weeks,
the second debate's at town hall. That'll be really interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But you do get to yell at that one because there's another person.
Well, but the people in the audience are going to be asking very interesting questions, and it's really hard for Trump to be a bully and stalk your opponent the way he did with Clinton. Clinton won all those debates. It didn't really matter. I don't think these debates are really going to matter. But if you have some, I'm not really sure about Biden, then, perhaps that debate would be good.
Well,
and before we run out of time on the air, I got to mention Biden spent a lot of time in Florida yesterday. Going after the Puerto Rican vote in the Orlando area. There's some great articles about that and how important that is and how worried Republicans are that, as they put it, Orlando is pumping blue blood throughout all of Central Florida because it's just turning more Democratic, and they're getting their act together and starting to put together some pretty good, get out the vote stuff.
Okay.
The
good.
Early vote in North Carolina is still going okay. We still don't know how much is going to be early, how much is going to be in person, how much is going to be day of. And so right now, it looks like a steady race. Things are going Biden's way. It's not done because we don't know if something's going to change, but it's going to take a change to allow Trump to sneak in.
Okay. Well, let's not have that change.
Right? And then I just have to read you this last tweet, which I have on the Pundit Roundup. I just thought it was very funny.
Okay, let's see.
Now all I have to do is find it. But it was from David Byler, who does a lot of election analysis. He used to be at Real Clear Politics. Now he's at the Washington Post.
That is funny.
Okay. And let's see if I can find it. And here's the date. The date is May 7th, 2019.
This is in the Roundup? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
May 7th, 2019. And I'll just read the quote because it's just so good. All right. And he says, and remember, this is when we were having the Democratic primary and all of that sort of stuff. And
right, May. Okay.
He says, back in May 2019, it'd be kind of funny if after all of this, Biden just cruised through, got the nomination, and won the popular vote by 6 or something.
Yeah, that would be funny. And funnier now, what if it was 7.0?
Not a prediction what will happen. Just thinking about what has seemed like the darkest timeline could actually become the most boring timeline.
Yeah. That's
pretty good.
Not bad at all, really. Well, Data Byler. That's can't beat that. What did he use? Data or something?
Yeah.
That's That would be boring. That is okay. Well, Abby's had enough, but it is funny. It would be kind of
it's
funny.
garbage pickup time. It's Wednesday.
Okay, excellent. Please put out the trash. Separate out your recyclables, even though they're not doing anything with plastic. And good. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, bark, bark. Yeah, I've got a behind-the-scenes message here. Okay, the barking must just be not suitable for air at this point, so we'll just say, all right, thanks very much, Greg, and see you and hear you tomorrow, and maybe we should just bring Abby in instead. All right, very good. We got a good roundup here and a good launching pad for the rest of the day. Other things, that will bear on the race or American democracy and its future are out there, and we can share them. But again, this was like by morning, by nearly showtime, I was kind of thinking like, I don't know what to do. I mean, I could rant for 2 hours easily about the waiter comment. That way, I could really use up 2 hours on that. I just don't know how persuasive it'll be after the first 5 to 15 seconds. Everybody heard the comment. They all, I think, caught all the nuance on there. I guess the only other thing I would add to all of this that I haven't discussed on the air about that particular comment was I do think it is a little interesting. A little bit. We'll just give a little bit of time to it. That Trump is given this national forum to convince everybody of the wisdom of his approach to the pandemic. And when questioned about one of the central issues of the pandemic, mask usage, he essentially makes an argument for why, after all this time opening up everything in all of these states, restaurants ought to be closed again. And I don't think he knew that he was wandering onto that territory. He meant to. I wonder whether going into it, I do have to question whether going into it, he thought that he would land on waiters. I think he may have surprised and shocked himself with that one and just had a brain blank, but that's just the normal condition of his brain. So maybe he didn't notice it. He just like brain farted out waiters. And I think he may have caught himself by surprise on that one. But in the end, what it ends up being is that's an argument, if anything, that restaurants ought to be closed again, that we need to go back to shutdown mode. And I don't think you even realized that. And I think that may have, brushed past everybody, even Stephanopoulos and those watching last night, too. So I pointed out now. More after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I have to look back in my tweets to see if I can find, there it is, that AJ Delgado tweet that indicated that the answer to Kevin Cruz's question about who in the White House agreed to have Trump do this town hall session. AJ Delgado laying that at the feet of Jason Miller. He points out, of course, or she points out, he's the Trump campaign's chief strategist and former communications director. He's also friendly with Stephanopoulos and likely greased the wheels for this town hall. Tough breaks, Don. And, yeah, I guess that's the case. Also in the news, in Twitter news this morning, this piece from SV Date over at HuffPost. Trump campaign hiding payments to top advisor embroiled in child support battle. Who would that be? It's Jason Miller. Jason Miller, the subheader says, has claimed he speaks to the president daily, yet filings do not show him receiving any money from the re-election campaign. Maybe he's volunteering, maybe like Paul Manafort, and nothing bad ever came of that, right? He's not volunteering, of course. He's getting his payments through shell corporations in order to hide the fact that he's getting those payments. Why would a top advisor type person who's constantly in the running for high-level campaign jobs for Republicans around the country hide the fact that he has a professional relationship with the Trump campaign? Could be that he doesn't want the devastating loss on his record, possibly, but that can't really be it either for Jason Miller, because Jason Miller's resume is full of devastating losses. He just operates in an area where that doesn't matter. And I mean, I guess that's certainly likely true for a lot of Democratic operatives as well. The fact that you lost the race doesn't matter so much as the fact that you had some experience working on it. They don't look for people who bat 1,000 because there wouldn't be anybody left to hire. But maybe more to the point is Jason Miller is probably hiding this financial relationship because he is embroiled in a custody, or not a custody battle, but a child support battle. And if the courts are able to demonstrate, thanks to records from the FEC, that he's being paid any money at all, not let alone large, enormous sums of money, they will garnish his wages and pay AJ Delgado for the chore of raising their children on her own, and that he doesn't want. He wants to be able to hold on to all the money. So that's what the lowbrow answer to why he's hiding it. But anyway, SV Date is the one who documents that it is being hidden. Trump's re-election campaign is hiding what it pays a top advisor who claims he speaks to the president daily and who's embroiled in a long-running dispute with a former lover over how much child support he can afford to pay. And I'm sure he gets around to pointing out that it's more than just a former lover. It is a former colleague on the Trump campaign in 2016 running about making America great again and moral values, yada, yada, yada. You know how that goes. It is relevant to what they were doing. Jason Miller, who joined the re-election team this time around in late spring after having worked on Trump's other previous bid and who served as an informal advisor to him since 2017, has not once appeared on the 2020 campaign's filings or on its expenses with the FEC. Also absent from the filings is Miller's firm, SHW Partners LLC, for which he describes himself as a principal. If Miller can be shown to have a higher income than he has detailed, a court could force him to pay more child support. See, so that's what's going on here. According to Florida court filings in the support dispute, Miller reported an income of the poor guy is only reporting $683,660 in 2019, but he continued to argue that he couldn't afford to pay $3,167 per month in child support for the son he fathered during the 2016 Trump campaign with a female colleague. For a period of 6 months earlier this year, he paid only $500 a month in child support, despite reporting monthly personal expenses that included $1,500 for food and home supplies, $750 for meals out, which you're not supposed to be doing, $473 for maid service, and $1,517 in car payments. Well, so he's a dirty deadbeat, and we all know it. This goes on to detail exactly how dirty and exactly how deadbeat he is. And the interesting part would be, and I recommend the article to you, about how they are structuring payments such that it looks like he's not getting any money from the Trump campaign, but he really is. Short answer there is it is perhaps this time again going through Steve Bannon. I'll give you just a quick, there's a paragraph down here that makes mention of him. Starting in October 2019, Miller began working with former top White House aide and 2016 campaign colleague Steve Bannon on a pro-Trump podcast and radio show. He received $20,000 a month from a Bannon-controlled nonprofit, according to a recent Salon.com report. I guess missing from this report is how that money got from wherever it started into Steve Bannon's nonprofit. That's another real interesting aspect of the story. To me, of course, I'm just going to focus on the fact that I'm just going to say this once here. He got paid $20,000 a month to do a podcast and radio show. I'm doing a podcast and radio show. It's not pro-Trump. And that's the problem. See, if I were to switch and become a pro-Trump Republican, I mean, I guess if you're ever scratching your head, you all know the real answer as to why people would degrade themselves this way. And the answer is $20,000 a month. It's good money. And, right, I'm doing what amounts to an anti-Trump podcast and radio show. I do not receive $20,000 a month. So there you have it. File that under why do you get up in the morning? I don't know. It's costing me $20,000 a month to be anti-Trump, to be, pro-science, pro-truth, let's get the F out of this COVID-19 pandemic instead of let's condemn everybody to die slowly, eventually, from this disease through sheer negligence and malice. So there you have it. In case you ever wondered, what does it cost to do something like this after all? And now the full answer is $20,000 a month. Wow. So that sucks. I can't believe that there are such people out there. But he sucks at everything and gets $20,000 a month to do it. And that's not his only income either. So I don't know. I'm resentful, and I wish we could make that different. We need, I don't know, where are the rich people to pay me to do this? Isn't this important? I guess not. Economics says no. So I guess F economics from here on in. All right. What else is Steve Bannon up to? He's in the news again because he's a filthy, disgusting grifter, and we hope he drops dead yesterday. But anyway, there's also news. Here's the report from the Daily Beast, thanks to Adam Ronsley and this pop-up ad, who's getting in the way of my saying Lachlan Markay, also on this piece. Steve Bannon is behind a bogus study, can you believe it, that China created COVID. And of course, there's a lot to this. This is very interesting. The study goes against basically all scientific evidence and expert opinion, but waiters like it. But it fits with the former Trump advisors' anti-China posture. Before we even bother getting into the article, and I don't know if we're going to get through the whole thing, why does the former Trump advisor, have such an anti-China posture? Now, some of it he may come by honestly, but I doubt that very much. I doubt that there's any, really. What's actually happening here is, of course, you'll remember that we just last discussed him, last month, being arrested on the super yacht of a Chinese dissident billionaire. And you might wonder, what was he doing on the mega yacht of this dissident Chinese billionaire? Either at all, or that would get him arrested, or what have you. And, the answer, the most apparent answer, it seems, there's no direct discussion of this in the article, but there is a photograph of Steve Bannon. And I think the answer is eating bonbons and pouring hydrochloric acid on his face, I guess, is what's been going on. I don't know. Maybe I got the acid wrong, but it's some kind of acid. That's what was, I guess, going on in the hot tub of the house he rented all that long ago. And we thought, oh my God, he's dissolving bodies. And little did we suspect that it was his own body that he was dissolving this whole time, starting with his face. But I don't know. But so long story short, I guess, whether it's told in this article or not, is essentially he's found a Chinese dissident sugar daddy. So whatever he's working on is going to be anti-Chinese government. A dissident against the Chinese government is paying for his lifestyle, so he pays back the sugar daddy by being anti-China. And right now, the big problem for Trump is he can't get us out of this pandemic. So, and doesn't want to. And so the job becomes, we need to blame this on somebody. And Bannon, who has lots of free time, I guess, in between scarfing bonbons and dissolving his face, says, I can handle that for you. Why don't we blame it on China? Is there any evidence? I don't care if there's any evidence. There's a guy paying me to be mad at the Chinese government, and that's what I'm going to do. So here we are. A new study purporting to show that the novel coronavirus was manufactured in a Chinese lab was published by a pair of nonprofit groups linked to Steve Bannon, the former top Trump strategist, now facing felony fraud charges, the ones for which he was arrested on the yacht. The study, co-authored by a Chinese virologist, because you got to have one of them, who fled Hong Kong this year, claims that, quote, laboratory manipulation is part of the history of SARS-CoV-2. There may or may not be a germ, no pun intended, of truth in there somewhere. Let's say kernel instead. Its findings were quickly picked up by a handful of prominent news organizations such as the New York Post, it is a news organization, it's prominent anyway. It shouldn't be, but it is, which hyped the, quote, explosive allegations that run counter to virtually all existing scientific literature on the source of the virus, minus discussions with waiters. I must add. The study is the work of the Rule of Law Society, which is automatically suspicious at the state, and the Rule of Law Foundation, which tells you that they are probably both a 501c3 and a 501c4, one arm allowed to do political work when the other one isn't. They are sister nonprofit organizations that Bannon was instrumental in creating. The side-by-side C3, C4 things popular back in the day with Newt Gingrich, who I think really kind of popularized that format for right-leaning organizations looking to do their work on the taxpayer dime. According to documents posted on the Society's website last year, he served as that group's chair. The Bannon connection was first spotted by Kevin Bird, a PhD candidate at Michigan State University, and shared by Carl Bergstrom, a biology professor at the University of Washington, who called the study bizarre and unfounded. How do you like that as a review? Put that on the dust jacket. Bizarre and unfounded, Carl Bergstrom, University of Washington. A search of Google Scholar and the Rule of Law Society and Rule of Law Foundation websites indicates that the organizations have not previously published scientific or medical research, and it's unclear whether the paper received any peer review. It was posted on Monday on the website Zenodo. Everyone knows Zenodo. It's a publicly available repository of scientific and academic research to which anyone can upload their work. So I'll upload something later today. Both of the nonprofits, my study of the dissolving of faces in acid. Well, I'll post that one. Both of the nonprofits behind the study were formed in conjunction with exiled Chinese billionaire Guo Wengui, with whom Bannon has collaborated, that's a nice name for it, on a number of advocacy efforts targeting the Chinese government and business endeavors that have drawn the scrutiny of federal law enforcement officials. In addition to their work on the rule of law, nonprofits Bannon and Guo have also collaborated on a news site, G News, I guess stands for Guo, that has published stories suggesting that the coronavirus was manufactured by the Chinese military. In July, Bannon appeared to tease forthcoming scientific studies supporting his contention that the coronavirus originated in a lab in Wuhan, China. He told the Daily Mail that scientists from the lab had defected to the U.S. and were collaborating with American intelligence agencies. On the War Room Pandemic podcast, Bannon has hosted others who have speculated that the virus may have been a Chinese bioweapon, but he has said that he believes the most plausible explanation is that it came out of experiments that were going on at the Wuhan lab, which is pretty super vague, really. That's a line that has been echoed by some prominent U.S. officials, President Donald Trump, he's an idiot, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's corrupt and an idiot. Both, they both are. What's the point in differentiating? They've both alluded to intelligence reports supporting that theory. They're not intelligence reports at all, probably. It turns out they're the published work of these two idiot societies. This evidence is circumstantial, to be sure, wrote Senator Tom Cotton, Harvard, in an April column for the Wall Street Journal, but it all points toward the Wuhan labs. It really all points to Bannon and his face-dissolving activities. But whatever. If you say that, then people won't credit it. So you obscure the origins. Well, while an accidental leak from the virology lab in Wuhan remains a theoretical possible source of the initial outbreak in the city, the vast majority of the scientific literature on the virus has determined that the origins were natural and that it was not laboratory manufactured. Dr. Fauci, you know who he is, has stressed repeatedly that all evidence indicates that the virus was not man-made. The study published by Bannon's group on Monday is therefore particularly incendiary. The virus is not from nature, declared Dr. Li Meng Yan, one of the scientists who conducted the study during a Monday appearance on a British talk show. She called reports that the virus originated in a Wuhan meat market a smokescreen designed to obscure its true origins. But other virologists disagree and say the paper makes false claims about a number of basic facts. Basically, it's all circumstantial, and some of it is entirely fictional. Dr. Angela Rasmussen, a virologist at Columbia University, told the Daily Beast of the study. The paper leads with the claim that the coronavirus's genes are, quote, suspiciously similar to that of a bat coronavirus discovered by military laboratories in China, an assertion Rasmussen says shouldn't be surprising because they are related SARS-like coronaviruses. The study's authors made a similar claim about a portion of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, which viruses use to breach and infect cells, and wrote that it's similar to the original SARS virus in a suspicious manner and suggests genetic manipulation, as opposed to they're just similar species. SARS-CoV, the original one, also used ACE2 as a cellular receptor, as do other SARS-like bat coronaviruses, Rasmussen says. It's not suspicious and is in fact expected that the receptor binding domains that bind the same protein would be similar. We'll just take her word for it on that one. Rasmussen also said that the paper misrepresented basic facts about another part of coronavirus spike proteins known as furin cleavage sites. Wow. The authors claim that SARS-CoV-2's cleavage site, is unique and unseen elsewhere in nature. They usually cover it up, I guess. But according to Rasmussen, furin cleavage sites occur naturally in many other beta-CoVs, including MERS-CoV and other SARS-like bat coronaviruses. Okay, it's a little jargony. Yan has said that she fled China to avoid reprisals from the government there over her allegations that it was not being forthcoming about the origin and nature of the virus. She said she warned officials in December that the virus was highly transmissible between humans, but that her allegations were ignored. Donald Trump heard about them the next month and then just ignored them himself. The University of Hong Kong School of Public Health, where Yan was employed, has disputed her allegations that the university failed to heed her warnings prior to the outbreak in China. In August, Yan appeared on Bannon's podcast, the $20,000 a month podcast that he's doing with Miller, or is it a different one? I don't know. During that show, Bannon said that he was, quote, still not in the camp that believes they purposely let it out, but I've been strongly in the camp from the beginning that it came out of the Wuhan P4 lab, and that's proof that he got it right. He called it the P4 lab, and that's jargony. So there you have it. He gave you a tactical lie. It sounds awesome. Unrelated to his work with the rule of law groups, Bannon is also facing felony charges. He would say it's unrelated, but it's paid for by the same guy, of course. Felony charges over what federal prosecutors say was an effort to extract millions of dollars from a nonprofit seeking to privately finance the construction of a wall on the southern U.S. border. Bannon has pleaded not guilty to those charges. Following publication of this piece, Yan appeared on Fox News host Tucker Carlson's primetime program on Tuesday night after Yan reiterated her claims that the virus was developed in a lab and that the Chinese government released it intentionally. Carlson, who's become one of Fox's loudest coronavirus skeptics, offered up a big caveat at the end of the interview. Unfortunately, this is not the forum for the details of your research, he said. I don't have the grounding to ask you the right questions, but this is where you wish for a functioning media, because what you just said completely changes everything we think we know about the pandemic that is wrecking our country. Except it doesn't, because you don't know enough how to ask a question to see whether it's worth allowing it to change everything we think we know. Bannon's name, meanwhile, did not come up in the segment. So there you have what professional face melter and mega grifter Steve Bannon is up to. I just wish he'd get down to bone and brain tissue already and finish himself off. Let's see. News that other operatives are also kicking it into high grifting gear is out there. The Washington Post reporting that pro-Trump youth group leader Charlie Kirk, of course, Turning Points USA, I think that's right, his bizarro operation. Pro-Trump youth group enlists teens in secretive campaign likened to a troll farm, prompting rebuke by Facebook and Twitter. We'll believe the rebuke when we see it. One tweet, we are told, claimed coronavirus numbers were intentionally inflated, adding, "It's hard to know what to believe." Another warned, "Don't trust Dr. Fauci." This piece authored by Isaac Stanley Becker for the Washington Post, I should have mentioned earlier. A Facebook comment argued that mail-in ballots, quote, "will lead to fraud for this election," while an Instagram comment amplified the erroneous claim that 28 million ballots went missing in the past 4 elections. The messages have been emanating in recent months from the accounts of young people in Arizona seemingly expressing their own views, standing up for President Trump in a battleground state and echoing talking points from his re-election campaign. Far from representing a genuine social media groundswell, however, the posts are the product of a sprawling yet secretive campaign that experts say evades the guardrails put in place by social media companies to limit online disinformation of the sort used by Russia during the 2016 campaign. Teenagers, some of them minors, are being paid to pump out the messages at the direction of Turning Point Action, singular, Action, an affiliate of Turning Point, singular, USA, the prominent conservative youth organization based in Phoenix, according to 4 people with independent knowledge of the effort. Their descriptions were confirmed by detailed notes from relatives of one of the teenagers who recorded conversations with them about the efforts. The campaign draws on the spam-like behavior of bots and trolls with the same or similar language posted repeatedly across social media, but it is carried out, at least in part, by humans paid to use their own accounts, though nowhere disclosing their relationship with Turning Point Action or the digital firm brought in to oversee their day-to-day activity. One user included a link to Turning Point USA's website in his Twitter profile until the Washington Post began asking questions about the activity. In response to questions from the Post, Twitter on Tuesday suspended at least 20 accounts involved in the activity for platform manipulation and spam. Facebook also removed a number of accounts as part of what the company said is an ongoing investigation. The effort generated thousands of posts this summer on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, according to an examination by the Post and an assessment by an independent specialist in data science. Nearly 4,500 tweets containing identical content that were identified in the analysis probably represent just a fraction of the overall output. Yes, so happening here, it is noted down here, just one paragraph ahead, in 2016, there were Macedonian teenagers interfering in the election by running a troll farm and writing salacious articles for money, said Graham Brookie, director of the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. In this election, the troll farm is in Phoenix. So it's good that they've onshored the jobs, I suppose. But there you have it. Another of these fake operations, this time run by Turning Point, who, by the way, obviously also adopting the Gingrich-Bannon model of splitting their operation into different arms. I don't know whether that's necessarily aimed at saying, well, if you find one and shut it down, we'll still be able to operate the others, or whether it's a dodge to be able to take in money on the 501c3 side and offer donors a tax exemption, a tax deduction for their donations, and then funnel the money to arms that are have more leeway under the tax code for doing political work, like 501c4s, 501h, etc. But I guess, the code still exists, so the loophole is there to exploit. So there's good old grassroots teenager Charlie Kirk taking advantage of that one. So more to read in that one. I recommend it to you. We move on to a couple other items. I meant to spend some time on this yesterday, or maybe we can spend the last segment on this. We'll return to foreign policy issues. Oh, that reminds me. There was a tweet yesterday that I ought to grab up. Maybe one of the worst analyses of the Trump campaign to date. That'll serve perhaps as a good introduction to what's going on. So note to self to find that tweet about foreign policy and the Trump campaign. And I guess as our break now looms, I don't know, which direction do we go? How about the other consistent dirty trickster and hoaxer who's got himself wrapped up in another stupid controversy? Jacob Wohl back in the news because he effed something else up. I'll just throw this one to you and let you read it off the air. Jacob Wohl staged a fake FBI raid on his business partner, and actors apparently were hired for the production and are the sources of this information. A Virginia man who responded to a Craigslist ad seeking actors to play FBI agents quickly discovered he'd been roped into yet another Jacob Wohl, and I forget the first name of his partner, Wohl Berkman hoax. A supposed FBI raid on the home of an infamous Republican dirty trickster appears to have been a ruse, one that began falling apart even as its perpetrators managed to dupe a major national newspaper. You'll never guess which one. It's Washington Post, but I think they got out of it later on. On Monday, a Virginia man who responded to a Craigslist ad seeking actors to play FBI agents for a television pilot came forward to say that he'd been roped into the latest hoax orchestrated by bumbling right-wing smear merchants Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall. So that's the news. I mean, it's another one of it's more of the same, essentially. They put together a stupid operation. I guess the idea was to make it look like the government and maybe even the deep state was out to stop them from revealing what amazing, awesome, exclusive information they had developed. And it has all the Jacob Wall hallmarks, including like fake detective bureaus that are registered in his mom's name. Again, he seems to love this. Obviously, it's intentional. He keeps doing the same thing over and over again. How they're not arrested now, I have no idea. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, all right, where were we on this? Oh, yes, I found the tweet that we were looking for in terms of the bad take, so I got that available. And all right, when we transition to the foreign policy discussion, we can do that. But yeah, I was wondering about that Jacob Wall thing, like how he's not arrested at this point. He's doing this thing pretty regularly. And now, of course, I guess the dodge is, the plan is to say I wasn't paying people to impersonate FBI agents because I was making some sort of movie production. You know, it's not illegal to hire actors to play FBI agents to produce a movie, but if you're hiring them to produce what is essentially a video news release purporting to show an actual FBI raid and then disseminating that to the news, I don't know why you shouldn't be under investigation for impersonating FBI agents. It's just, one of those looming questions. And I did see one of our regular Twitter friends and sources speculating about it, the NYC Southpaw, asking the question after this stupid story broke. And I don't know that I'm even going to bother reading the rest of it. It's just another Jacob Wall garbage situation. But Southpaw saying it's been nearly 2 years since the special counsel's office referred Berkman and Wall to the FBI, he's now impersonating, to the FBI for reportedly paying women to make baseless sexual assault claims against Robert Mueller. What has happened in the 2 years since they were referred to the FBI for investigation? And I guess the answer is nothing, because they're still out there not only trying to pull their stupid hoaxes, which is the same hoax over and over again, right down to the details that led them to be discovered as hoaxsters last time. So it's probably a pretty easy case, and they're just declining to take it up for whatever reason. So you have that, which is nice, which is to say we're never getting out of this thing. And just like the coronavirus pandemic, we're never getting out of this revolving door of idiotic hoax grifterism. Is that even a word? I don't know. I'm inventing the words to talk about the crazy situation we're in here. Let's see. Some developments, maybe, sort of, in the Michael Caputo story. Let's see. He deleted his Twitter account yesterday. I don't know if we made mention of that. And I guess we're now at the point where I guess we can't quite tell whether he is being dismissed or fired, or whether he's taking voluntary leave and going into mental health treatment or something. But apparently, I don't know. I guess the possibility remains that he is on the outs from his job right now, which of course he insisted would never happen because he had the president's trust, and he knew that because the president had told him so, which is usually the mark of death for anybody. And I guess it looks to be the mark of death for him and his job as well. So I know I didn't park it somewhere because I didn't think I was going to return to Caputo, but I'll have to look for the Caputo story about what is his current status and see if that matches up. In the meantime, I said I was going to head over to the foreign policy area because I ran out of time yesterday to discuss what I thought we could tie into our quick discussion of various State Department related issues, including the increased risk that American officials now believe they could be in for being charged with war crimes and crimes against humanity, both in Afghanistan and now in Yemen. And we left off in the middle of the story about the risks regarding Yemen, but I think we had pretty much given you a pretty good idea of where that was coming from. And hopefully in yesterday's show summary, you were able to, if you were interested, click through to find that piece and finish reading it. I don't think there were any major revelations left except to discuss the provenance of the policy on Yemen and how the State Department had shaken loose the congressional blockade against sending these weapons to the Saudis and the Emiratis and the rest of the coalition fighting this war in Yemen. And how they got around it was they had Pompeo essentially use a loophole in the law that allows him to declare an emergency. You recall that he declared an emergency of some kind with respect to what Iran was up to in the Persian Gulf, and that this loophole strategy had been coordinated by someone placed in the State Department, who then got a pat on the head and a promotion for coming up with this scheme. I think this is about where we left off here. Let's see. We have Trump firing Rex Tillerson. And then while they're waiting for Pompeo to get his Senate approval, they have an acting Secretary of State. And then officials worried about the arms sale believed Sullivan, the acting secretary, to be attentive to the humanitarian concerns in the Yemen war. In the roughly 3 weeks while he was running the department, they sent in an appeal for additional clarity. And he responded by approving a memo that the officials had drafted that recommended carrying out a robust strategy to reduce civilian casualties in Yemen. Remember this? And updating the legal analysis before the bomb sales move forward, according to U.S. officials, 2 of them. But the agency failed to do those, the inspector general later determined. So basically they said, all right, well, we can go ahead with the weapons sales if there is a positive and affirmative plan in place to minimize civilian casualties, to which everybody said, okay, yes, reasonable. And then they just said, what if we don't come up with any such strategy and just say, let's give them the weapons anyway? Can we make that work? And eventually that is what happened. Pompeo takes over. That August, a coalition jet drops the American-made bomb on a school bus in Yemen. Remember this one? Trump calls it a horror show and says, look, I'm appropriately appalled. Now let's move forward with more weapons sales. The next month, Pompeo issued a formal certification to Congress that the Saudi-led coalition was working to minimize civilian deaths, despite news reports and internal State Department assessments to the contrary. Senior department officials had warned Pompeo against the certification, in part because they had grown more anxious over the legal issues. Officials said the move provoked a backlash in Congress, strengthened lawmakers' resolve to continue blocking the arms sales. And now, by April 2019, Pompeo, frustrated by the delay, and senior State Department political appointees are getting together with him to discuss a rarely invoked tactic to force through this $8.1 billion in weapons sales without congressional approval, and that was declaring an emergency over Iran. I'm not certain how it even matters what's going on in Iran, given that this war is being fought in Yemen, but the idea, I think the linkage is, well, the Yemeni rebels fighting this war are backed by Iran, and so this really is all about Iran, and so therefore sell weapons to yet another country which has nothing to do with it, but is also anti-Iranian. At the center of those discussions, remember this guy, Marik String, a former Senate aide who had joined the State Department in 2017. By January 2019, he had become the acting head of the Political Military Affairs Bureau and closely oversaw the emergency planning. Pompeo announced the emergency on May 24, 2019, and the stalled weapons deal moved forward, including the sale of some 120,000 bombs and bomb parts to the Saudis and Emiratis. But no updated civilian casualty mitigation strategy or legal analysis was ever carried out before the equipment was shipped, according to the Inspector General's report. Released this August, the report said that although Pompeo did not violate the law in declaring an emergency, the State Department had failed to take proper measures to reduce civilian casualties and the associated legal risk. In other words, it was legal for him to declare an emergency because the law is written such that if everybody just assumes the secretary is acting in good faith in declaring the emergency and that there's like totally evidence and everything somewhere in the bowels of the State Department, everything's good. And what do you do if the Secretary of State is acting in bad faith and there's no evidence? Well, nothing, because the law doesn't say anything about it, because of course the Secretary of State isn't going to do that. He's the Secretary of State. That wouldn't happen in a million years, except it is happening now. So it's not illegal, but it does expose American officials to legal risk of war crimes and other crimes against humanity being leveled against them by the International Criminal Court. So F the International Criminal Court and ban them and call them terrorists. That's the response from this State Department. Notably, the public section of the final report did not include a recommendation from an earlier draft. The department should, quote, update its analysis of legal and policy risks related to selling bombs to the Saudi coalition. According to the text obtained by the Times, the language of that recommendation was edited and removed and shifted over to the classified annex after pressure from State Department officials. The day Pompeo declared the emergency, he also promoted Mr. String to be the State Department's top lawyer. From that position, String has tried to pressure Steve A. Linick, the Inspector General, to drop his investigation. Why not, right? Mr. Linick said in congressional testimony that this was the case in this past June. Mr. String's office also handled the redacting of the report, while R. Clark Cooper, the current head of the Political Military Affairs section, pushed to classify the most significant material in the report after he had been an interview subject in the investigation. This May, Pompeo pushed Mr. Trump to fire Mr. Linick. Since the emergency declaration, which applied to only the sales last year, the Saudis and their partners have sought to buy more American bombs. About $800 million in orders is now pending, held up, of course, by the same congressional review process that had frustrated Pompeo and the White House last time around. The Emirates announced last summer that it was withdrawing most of its forces from the grinding war in Yemen, but it continues fighting in the Libyan war. From July to early August this year, at least 3 airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen killed civilians, including a total of nearly 24 children, according to the United Nations, aid workers, and Houthi rebels. One strike occurred during a celebration after the birth of a newborn baby. A human rights worker said the boy, just 1 week old, did not survive. So, yes, there could be some crimes against humanity and war crimes liability. Sure. But you see the extent to which they are, to which they're working inside the State Department to bury all information that could actually lead to such a conclusion, and of course preventing the ICC from bringing those charges in the first place. And in the meantime, using every loophole in the law available to thwart the will of Congress and to continue sending these bombs. Just wanted to put that out there, show you what the play was, name the names, and we'll let it lie at the moment. There's not much more that we can do to develop that storyline. There were other stories regarding activities of all sorts in the State Department that I wanted to share with you. One we hinted at yesterday, which had to do with, it was the event yesterday that they held the signing of the historic peace agreements. We now have peace in the Middle East by Jared Kushner's definition. That is to say, there is peace between countries that were never at war, but they are in the Middle East, and so therefore peace in the Middle East. Never mind what happens to the Palestinians. It's been written up. It's not just me saying it. Here's a piece from Joseph Krauss at the AP, who I think puts it about as well as it can be put here in the headline. Trump's Mideast deals tout peace where there was never war. It's not just the opposite of war, peace. It's something else, too. I don't know. Ordinarily, I'd say that there's more that has to go into it proactively, but apparently the absence of war is enough, even if war was absent before. But the continuing absence of war, there you have it, it's peace. For the first time in more than a quarter century, a U.S. president will host a signing ceremony between Israelis and Arabs at the White House, billing it as an historic breakthrough in a region long known for its stubborn conflicts. That's the optics of it, to people who don't look any further. There's Arabs and there's Israelis, and it's a peace deal, and that's all there is to it. That's what they would like you to take away from it. But while the optics of Tuesday's events will evoke the groundbreaking agreements that ended decades of war between Israel and neighboring Egypt and Jordan, and that launched the peace process with the Palestinians, the reality is quite different. The United Arab Emirates will establish diplomatic relations with Israel, a fellow U.S. ally that it has never gone to war with, formalizing ties that go back several years. The agreement cements an informal alliance against Iran and could pave the way for the UAE to, guess what, acquire advanced U.S. weapons, while leaving the far more contentious Israeli-Palestinian conflict as intractable as ever. Again, just to emphasize this, when people say we want to work towards a Middle East peace agreement, they mean not just anywhere in the Middle East, but the Middle East. Not just anywhere in the Middle East, and not necessarily, I guess, between countries that have never been at war. They're talking about the Israel-Palestine issue. This does nothing with regard to the Israel-Palestine issue, and so it's hard to even classify it as a Middle East peace deal, even though it does involve more peace, and it is in the Middle East. Again, the fact that it happens to be cover for weapons sales, which are used to generate what I think generally we would all agree is the opposite of peace, also happening in the Middle East, is apparently of no consequence, I guess, to anybody here. And that's pretty amazing that this gets included in the under the umbrella of Middle East peace. And I guess, so Jared declares victory. I have created peace. Okay. A similar agreement announced Friday with Bahrain, which you may also recognize as not being at war, I don't think, with anybody at all in the Middle East, which welcomed a visiting Israeli cabinet minister as early as 1994, Bahrain did, also formalizes long-standing ties. The agreement with Bahrain has raised the possibility that Saudi Arabia, the ultimate prize in Israel's normalization drive, could follow suit. Bahrain's Sunni monarchy is closely allied with Saudi Arabia, which helped quash a popular uprising among the island nation's Shiite majority in 2011. Saudi Arabia has quietly acquiesced to the UAE deal, opening its airspace to commercial flights between Israel and the Emirates. But It's debatable whether agreements like these among already friendly countries do much to advance regional peace. The region's main conflict pits Israel and the Gulf Arab countries against Iran and its proxies. In the long term, and that's interesting too. I mean, here the main conflict is that one, not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There's certainly a reason to believe that that's a defensible position too. But it's not what people think of when they think of peace in the Middle East, quite honestly. But okay. The region's main conflict pits everybody against Iran. In the long term, many believe the biggest threat to Israel's survival as a Jewish majority and democratic state is the conflict with the Palestinians, who may soon outnumber Jews in the territory between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, whatever you choose to call it. The Trump administration hopes that as more Arab countries normalize ties with Israel, it will pressure the Palestinians to return to peace negotiations, which ground to a halt more than a decade ago. Over the last 3 years, Trump has cut off aid to the Palestinians, recognized contested Jerusalem as Israel's capital, dropped the long-standing U.S. opposition to Israeli settlements, and released a Mideast plan that overwhelmingly favors Israel. The breakdown of the long-standing Arab consensus that recognition only be granted in return for territorial concessions, that's the important thing, has meanwhile left the Palestinians arguably more weak, isolated, and demoralized than at any point in their history. But rather than cowing Palestinian leaders into submission, those moves have only made them more defiant. President Mahmoud Abbas officially cut all ties to Israel and the U.S. in May and said the Palestinians would no longer be bound by any past agreements. That's progress. The Palestinians have rejected the UAE and Bahrain deals as betrayal of their cause, and I guess it is, and insist no other country has the right to negotiate on their behalf, and they certainly don't. But yeah, I guess that sort of highlights the other issue here, which is that these deals are Jared Kushner making personal deals with people he does personal business with and saying, can't you help me out here? We need something that appears to be Middle East peace. Sign this. Nothing changes really between you and Israel. We were already on good terms, as you know. Yes, it's going to cause the Palestinians to be angry with you for abandoning them, but screw them. Who cares? You and I will continue to exchange millions of dollars personally and billions of dollars in arms sales. You want the weapons? Do this. That's what's behind this. It's not any sense that they really, really want to normalize relations any further than they've already been normalized with Israel. Anyway, the article goes on at not that much more length to it, but I wanted to at least read you that headline and give you the background that's in here. Other issues swirling around the same topic. There was a tweet the other day that I picked up on from, reporter Andrew Feinberg, who's a White House reporter, I guess, writing here in the Independent in the UK, just noting the same thing as Donald Trump tweeted out the joint statement from the U.S., Bahrain, the Kingdom of Bahrain, you might as well point that out, and the State of Israel, and then the gobbledygook of the statement. But he notes here, Andrew does, 2 countries that have had contact for years and have never been at war with each other. Just pointing that out. Bahrain and Israel. Same goes for the UAE, of course. And so the opinion is widely held. Let's see. Another item of interest here that I put aside for myself. Yes, this was an interesting bit. John Cooper. Let's see. He's working for Biden, I guess, at this stage of the game. Formerly, it says here, chair of the Democratic Coalition, one of the outside advocacy groups working for a greater blue future, I guess. But John Cooper tweets this one out. Here's a scoop. The dispute between the Israel delegation and the White House staff over wearing face masks and maintaining social distancing is ongoing and very hot. I didn't even know there was one. Israeli security is making this a demand. And, those guys hardly know anything, really. The Israeli security community is like, oh, we're just a bunch of bullshitting waiters. And I'm not supposed to say that. I threw that one in there for free for you today. Yeah, we don't know anything about security here in Israel, right? Don't listen to us. We're just talking out of our hats. The Israeli security detail says, no, we really ought to have masks. And, thinking about this, by the way, we haven't really discussed it this much, the coronavirus numbers today. Yes, by the way, yesterday we clicked over in Worldometers to 200,000 dead here in the United States, just by way of statistics. Let's see. I think it took us in the order of about 2 weeks or so to get from 190,000 up to the 200,000 mark. And I counted 16 weeks, or exactly, actually, since my tweet when we passed the 100,000 mark. So, by the way, if you want to do the math, 16 weeks is 112 days. So how long did it take us to add 100,000 new deaths? The answer is 112 days. That's still a pretty steady 1,000 or so a day pace, and it doesn't look to be dropping off anytime soon. So it looks like we'll be approaching the election with about 250,000 dead. By the way, I think the last time they tried to put a metric to it, Trump said, if we have less than 100,000 dead, it'll be said that we've done a pretty good job here, a very good job. He later punted that and moved the goalpost to 200,000, but we've passed that too, so I guess we're officially outside of the good job zone here. But anyway, on top of the lists, along with us in terms of the number dead and the number infected, those numbers about how many are infected per 1 million residents, also put at the top of the list, at or near the top of the list, are Bahrain and Israel, which is coming in at the top of the daily new cases per million residents each time I do those charts. And so we're talking about 3 significant COVID-19 hotspots. And so no surprise that Israeli security was saying, yeah, we're not going to have this crap. We got to have face masks. So here's what's going on here, according to John Cooper. Israeli security is making the demand that there be face masks. White House staff are arguing among themselves as to what is safe versus what will please Trump versus what the waiters say, I guess we later learned. Trump has requested that no masks be worn and chairs be placed right next to each other for that event, as if this was one of his rallies. Trump is again saying there is, quote, no problem and the virus is going away. And just look at our economy. It's coming back. Israeli security responded, look, you got 200,000 Americans dead. It's getting worse. We won't allow our prime minister to get this virus. I mean, they have like their own secret service. They're there to protect their prime minister, and they're in direct conflict with what the White House is demanding. The Israeli delegation, meanwhile, when they can control things themselves, was told, do not leave your hotel. And they were told this actually by local D.C. authorities, it's alleged. But the White House, meanwhile, tells them, ignore local D.C. authorities. We're in control, not the local police. That much also highly in dispute. As of now, the White House plans to limit press coverage. They don't want Trump supporters seeing people wearing masks. Israeli security openly fears Netanyahu's age. They don't want him getting the virus or being around people not wearing masks, as Israel is about to enter their own 3-week lockdown. The official White House notice sent to the press states that all are requested to wear masks, but the White House will not enforce this. Even worse, they're encouraging White House staffers and others who will be attending not to wear masks as it, quote, looks better. So how did that resolve itself yesterday? I'm not entirely sure. I didn't get to watch the event, but apparently I think some of the reports that I have seen discussing it were that the outcome was Netanyahu agreed to appear maskless outside, but the moment they went back inside the White House, his mask went back on. All right. So there's that. I didn't even get time to get to the unrelated State Department news, which is that apparently a new investigation shows that Mike Pompeo's wife is running around running the place here. New emails reveal Pompeo's wife asked State Department staff to help with personal tasks, according to a report cited here in The Hill. And what were the personal tasks, by the way? This is really low. Did you get one of these? Probably not. You're not on the list, right? They asked for State Department staffers to work the week of Christmas. Why? In order to finish the Pompeo's quote-unquote personal holiday cards. According to newly revealed emails obtained by McClatchy, Susan Pompeo used a personal email to write to a longtime aide and State Department employee, Tony Porter, asking for help with their Christmas cards. I see that you're out of the office all next week, she wrote to Porter on December 19th. Gee, why would that be, right? Do you know, is Joe also out? Because I'm wondering, if we're sending out the last of our personal cards, who'll be there to help me? Well, the answer is, F you, do your own goddamn Christmas cards, you dip. Anyway, well, that didn't get conveyed, I don't think, in the email. But it probably should have been just more corruption. Just because it was State Department related, I thought I would include it there. We'll be back tomorrow to put the rest of the mishmash of disasters that Trump is saddling our country and the entire world with. Greg will be back there and help us organize our thoughts too. In the meantime, if you want your thoughts organized, get the hell out of here and go over to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, where Justice Putnam will help you organize them. What's he got on tap for you? Let's see. John Bolton's book is back in the news and subject of a bad faith effort, apparently. Can you believe it? On behalf of the White House, to say that he's been revealing classified material, even though, of course, the book was reviewed pre-publication. Don't know how exactly they're going to work that one out, but maybe Justice has a better idea for you.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Hey, what about international news? You know, Justice has an eye for that, too. An Algerian appeals court upheld the conviction of a journalist, causing alarm for human rights activists, and teachers rallied with healthcare workers in Spain over the government's poor COVID planning. Gee, everybody's got this problem all of a sudden, eh? We'll be back tomorrow. See you then.